Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking this time with us. You do embody what it means to break barriers. First openly transgender woman to serve as a state senator and now Congress. How do you walk this line of representing Delawareans who elected you to do a job in a community that is often misunderstood, misrepresented, and mistreated?
Well, I didn't run for public office to be a first. I didn't run to be a spokesperson for a movement. I ran to be a voice for Delawareans. I ran to work on all of the issues that matter. That's what I did in the Delaware State Senate, where I brought Democrats and Republicans together to pass paid family and medical leave and secure the largest investment in our state's Medicaid program since the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010. And it's what I'm doing in Congress, working to provide affordable child care, housing, and health care for every person. Because I know that the only way that I can guarantee that while I may be a first, I'm not the last, is to quite simply do the best job that I can to prove that no matter your background, all of us can participate in our democracy, and regardless of what identities you bring to the table, that when voters elect us to serve, they elect us to work on all the issues, they elect us to work together, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
It's now February. Are the butterflies now over with?
Well, the last 2 months have been a hell of a decade. We're obviously still unpacking our office. We're still hiring staff. So I'm still new to this. But I think the moment that you stop feeling the responsibility, feeling the awe of this job, feeling a little bit of butterflies as you start your day, I think the moment you stop feeling that is the moment you should look for another line of work, because this is awe-inspiring work. The stakes are high and the responsibility is big. And I feel that very deeply, and maybe sometimes it feels like butterflies in my stomach.
But you're ready to meet the moment.
Yeah, I feel ready for this job. I feel ready for the work at hand. I know what it takes to make change. It's not always easy, it's not always fair. Democracy isn't always easy or fair, but it is necessary, and it is what we celebrate on this President's Day, that we have a president, not a king, and that each one of us are temporary stewards of the American dream and the American experiment that has lasted us nearly 250 years. And if we do our job in this moment, if we carry that baton forward, hopefully it will be the inheritance of our children and grandchildren and their children for generations to come.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I was elected, I promised to work with anyone who would help Delaware and Delawareans, and to stand up to anyone who seeks to harm my state.
Well, that was my first speech on the floor of the House of Representatives. I was truly just focused on what I was there to speak about. I think what we have seen is that there are members of Congress who are much more interested in the reality show of politics than the purpose of politics, which is to actually make government work better for people and to deliver real and tangible results for people. I think that we see right now an effort to foment division and stoke culture wars in this country in an effort to distract from the fact that Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies are working systematically to cut and gut the federal government, and in so doing, undermine and eliminate vital programs that working people across this country rely on. In fact, we're about to see them go after Medicaid to strip health care away from roughly 1 in 5 Delawareans, 1 in 5 Americans who rely on Medicaid for health coverage. And so in that moment, I was focused on the speech that I was there to give, and that speech was about the fact that when I got elected, I told Delawareans that I would work with anyone who was willing to work with me to help Delaware, but also to stand up to the abuse of power that would harm Delawareans. And that's what we're seeing right now. And again, these attempts to grab headlines to go viral on social media, to stoke culture wars. That's not what I'm in Congress to do. I'm there to work on behalf of everyone. And, you know, if folks want to make a scene, if folks want to turn Congress and turn our government into a joke, that's on them, but I'm here to serve everyone.
First bill in Congress, in your first week, it was a bipartisan bill to prevent scams in the credit repair industry.
Yeah, I said that my focus in Congress was going to be on lowering costs for workers, retirees, and families to build an economy that works for everyone. And I also said that I would go to Congress, roll up my sleeves, dive into the details, and bring Democrats and Republicans together just like I did in the Delaware General Assembly. I was proud to be the first freshman Democrat to introduce legislation this Congress, and I was proud that it was bipartisan legislation. I joined with a Republican colleague of mine to introduce a bill that would prevent the predatory behavior we're seeing from so-called credit repair organizations that charge exorbitant large upfront fees on vulnerable Delawareans, vulnerable Americans, based on false promises of an improved credit score, and they end up doing nothing to actually improve that person's credit score. And so our legislation, our bipartisan legislation, would ban that predatory practice and guarantee that if people are paying for a product, they're actually getting results for that cost.
Honor to be here for my first Foreign Affairs Committee hearing. I am looking forward to working alongside each and every one of you in a bipartisan manner in support of U.S. interests. Unfortunately, right now, we are seeing a partisan attack.
I'm really proud to be a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, a committee that has historically been known for bipartisanship. Because at the end of the day, the issues that the Foreign Affairs Committee grapples with, issues of national security, issues of international economic relations, these are issues that should unite Democrats and Republicans in pursuit of common shared U.S. interests. Right now, we're seeing a global struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. Right now, we are seeing, unfortunately, an effort by the current administration to turn its back on our allies, to retreat from the world. We need to make sure we are putting our country first in all that we do, but the only way to do that is to guarantee that the U.S. continues to lead in the world, that the U.S. continues to support our allies, support democracy, and strengthen our economic ties with countries around the world, especially our democratic allies. And so I'm eager to work with Democrats and Republicans on that committee to support democracies around the world, and especially our democratic allies, and also to defend Delaware's interests and Delaware's economy in the global marketplace.
At what point did you decide, Sarah McBride, I want to get into politics, I want to make a difference?
You know, I have always been interested in government as a force for good. I have always been interested in spending whatever time I have on this earth leaving it better and kinder than I found it. And I think that government is the place where every avenue of society converges and you can make the most amount of change for the most number of people in the most number of ways possible. And, you know, I decided to run for office because I believe we have to have people who are willing to be serious, people who are willing to work across disagreement and difference in order to make government work better for people. And that's what I did in the Delaware General Assembly. It's what I'm working to do in Congress. Because at the end of the day, what was just wasn't working for far too many people. Far too many neighbors, Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike, people of all backgrounds, too often feel disrespected by our government. And I think that the only way to build a government that respects everyone is by delivering for all of us. But in order to do that, we have to send people to Washington who aren't there to play games, who aren't there to grab headlines, who aren't there to pick fights for the sake of fighting, but rather who are there to try to bring people together, defend their constituents, and make government work better. And that's why I got involved. That's why I ran for office, and that's why I decided to run for Congress, because we get the Congress, we get the government that we elect. And we need people who are interested in being constructive, productive parts of the solution to put themselves forward, to run for office, and particularly in this moment, run for federal office.
Why this moment for federal office?
You know, I think that a lot of people have given up on the idea that politics can work for them, that our government sees them and respects them. And I believe that the only way to solve, I think, a crisis of hope that this country faces in this moment, a crisis of hope rooted in the fear that we no longer have an individual or collective capacity to meet the scope and the scale of the challenges that we face, the only way to solve that crisis of hope is by proving that government can still work, that people are seen and heard, and that we are delivering for them. And I think at the federal level, over the last several decades, we've seen a toxicity in our politics. We've seen an approach to politics that treats it as a form of entertainment rather than as a form of public service. And I think that toxicity, it not only grinds government to a halt, it not only pushes us as citizens further and further apart to the point where we view one another as enemies, not as neighbors. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually produce the kind of results for people that they desperately need. People are hurting right now. People are in pain. And they need a government that works for them. And I think because our national politics have fallen into this state of entertainment over effectiveness, it's caused a lot of people to lose hope, and it's certainly left a lot of people behind. Yeah.
Where do you find your strength, your resolve? How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I'm very lucky. I am very lucky to have the privilege of serving a state that I love, of serving neighbors that I love in the halls of Congress. And you know, I think for me, there are tough days. There are days where the reality show that too often is Congress is on full display, where you see people who aren't interested in making government work, but rather grabbing attention for themselves. And you see the onslaught of attacks that we're seeing on government programs that people rely on to not just thrive, but to live, programs like Medicaid. And it's hard to keep moving forward. I think all of us feel that way. I think all of us are struggling with the volume and velocity of today's political environment, where there's just so much, and so much of it feels mean and hateful and divisive. But for me, I always come back to the fact that I get to represent Delaware. And I know that might sound hokey, but I love this state. This is the state that I was born and raised in. It's the state that helped shape me into the person that I am. It's the state that has helped me find my hope and to heal after losing my husband to cancer. And every time I take that drive back from DC and I enter Delaware, I get a smile on my face. And that is what keeps me going. That is what keeps me hopeful. It's the fact that I get to represent a great state filled with really good people. And they deserve a government that respects them. They deserve a government that delivers for them. And they need a member of Congress who's singularly focused on that goal. And it motivates me, it pushes me, but it also keeps me hopeful and frankly happy, because the love and the warmth that I see when I come back to this state, not for me, but for each one of us as neighbors, I know that that's what's possible in our politics if we bring some of those Delaware values to DC.
If it's just 2 years, or if you decide I'm going to run again, what do you hope right now, that your legacy would be?
So, you know, the reality of government is that change is often slow, and it requires us to persevere and persist toward our goals. And for me, the goal that drives me is building an economy that works for everyone. The goal that drives me is looking out for people through the inevitable challenges of life. You know, I was a caregiver to my husband during his battle with cancer, and I know how lucky we were. Despite the fact that cancer took his life, I know how lucky we were for him to have health insurance, for both of us to have paid leave. And every single day, I am focused on guaranteeing that little bit of breathing room, that little bit of support through the inevitable challenges of life, that's not a matter of luck, but rather the law of the land. And so for me, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, however long it takes, with every fiber of my being, I will work toward supporting people through those challenges, whether it's the joy of welcoming a child into your family or the terror of a serious illness, to make sure that workers, families, and retirees here in Delaware and across the country are able to access affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable childcare, paid leave, so that the American dream is truly affordable and accessible. And that might not all be done in the course of 2 years, particularly with an administration that seems hell-bent on taking us back rather than moving us forward. But I'll continue that work. I also hope in the first 2 years of my time in Congress that I'm part of a generation of elected officials who are working to bring out the better angels in our country rather than dividing us with fomented culture wars and scapegoating and fear-mongering. I hope to be among a generation of young elected officials, Democrats and Republicans, who recognize that we can only have a democracy if we have conversation across disagreement and work across disagreement. There is another kind of politics that is possible. It's a kind of politics we see here in Delaware, and I hope to be a part of that in Congress. And I continue to spend every single day working to bring back investment to Delaware. I work every single day to help bring jobs here to Delaware alongside Senator Coons and Senator Blunt Rochester, our governor, our new governor, Matt Meyer. We are Team Delaware, and we are pushing back against the worst excesses of this administration, but also working hand in hand to bring jobs and investment to Delaware so that this state can be a place where everyone can live, work, and raise a family.
I was a caregiver for my grandparents for a year and a half in between news jobs.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
Yes.
It's the hardest job that I've ever had.
Yes.
How was that experience for you? How did that shape kind of your paradigm and the way that you look at what you do today?
My time as a caregiver to my late spouse was the hardest, most challenging experience of my life. And yet I was lucky. And you know, in addition to what I said before, that the experiences that I had and the support that we had from our family, from our friends, from our employer, I perpetually through that experience thought, we can barely keep our head above water. How does anyone do this without even one of those layers of support? If you take away family, or if you take away friends, or if you take away the support of an employer, if you take away access to health insurance, how does anyone get through an illness like cancer and the challenge of caregiving? And so one, it put things into perspective. It reminded me how lucky I am, but also how much need there is across the state and around this country. It also, my time as a caregiver and the experiences I had also allowed me to see the amazing grace that so often can fill our lives as we face challenges. My brother is a radiation oncologist, and he said to me in the final few weeks of my husband's life, this is going to be incredibly difficult, but you should look around you and take stock in the acts of amazing grace that will fill your life. And that grace and those miracles were everywhere. And I think for me, it left me understanding that hope as an emotion and as a phenomenon. It only makes sense in the face of hardship. And it has allowed me, through challenges since, both personal and challenges for our country, to be able to look around and see those acts of amazing grace that fill our communities, that fill our state, that still fill our nation.